So, welcome back to Philosophy Roulette number 239, where we read and review philosophy papers on live on Twitch and later on YouTube. So here we are in Phil Papers, and we were just did a paper on epistemology, and everyone got to see me be angry because epistemology makes me angry. But we had some of the new stuff on the front page was from Kentness and philosophia. So we were looking at those journals, and we're going to see what we got. So here we go. It's short. We've got Timothy Williamson's coin flipping argument refuted prior to publication. I don't know if you can see, but I've got like a little highlighter that shows me the short ones. Can talk about hyperreal probabilities. Moore's paradox. I love Moore's paradox. An Evancian account. Let me just see what that says. Hongwu Quan. Have I read anything by Hongwu before? I might have. I don't know. In this paper, I develop and defend a novel account of Moore's paradox, which locates its source in self-reference. The main insight comes from Gareth Evans' discussion of transparency, which says that a normal person takes P to be directly relevant to the truth of "I believe that P." It has been noticed by many philosophers that Moore's paradox is closely related to Evans' transparency. However, Evans' claim that transparency is constitutively related to self-reference has received relatively little attention. Okay, that's nice. Not reading that. It seems very... it seems like another take, but nothing too radical. Dualism and exclusion. Bram Vasson. Many philosophers argue that exclusion arguments cannot exclude non-reductionist physicalism. No, I'm not talking about that. A note on Lang on contingent necessity makers. Nah, you know what? It takes more than more. Hey, more arguments. Okay. Several recent discussions of metaphysics disavow existence questions, claiming that they are metaphysically uninteresting because trivially settled in affirmative by Morean facts. Like, the Morean facts, by the way, is this is a hand. Hand is an external object. It is. That's what hands are. Therefore, the external world exists since there's external objects. Boom. Sorry, skeptics, you're wrong. That's the Moore's answer to the external world. And that's a Morean fact that this is a hand. And so that's what the point of existence questions. What exists? Well, the external world exists because hands exists. Okay. Let's see. Okay. DeMarshall. Say you're a radical skeptic, like Descartes' demon is in your world. It says the external world doesn't exist. You say, well, hey, here's my hand. My hand is an external object because that's what hands are. Therefore, since hands exists, external world exists. There you go. QED. Alright, so I'm not going to bother with her. Kentness, we just did some technical epistemology, and that stuff will just make me grumpy again. So, explaining what is going on with Morean facts, like here's a hand, is a bit of a cottage industry in philosophy. Yeah, it's great. I actually work on it myself a little bit, but explaining what is going on is very hard. Well, of course, then you exist too. Like, yeah, I'm an external object. Look at me. Here's my hand. Well, I exist, therefore, people exist. I'm a person. People are external objects, therefore, the external world exists. Boom, done. I exist. But this is just sort of like like humans are external objects. I'm a human, and therefore I exist, and like I'm an external object. So, why wouldn't I be external? Toward a unitary case for Russellian panpsychism. Well, that's kind of fun. Reviews. Against the repetition argument. I think this is a hedonism argument. Like, because if you have some hedonism that you can repeat over and over, is that Moore's position? That the external world exists? I don't remember exactly what More's position was. I'm sure Moore thought the external world existed. But the point is that it's a refutation of skepticism. And how do you understand the refutation of skepticism? Because it's completely easy to prove. It's trivial to prove that skepticism is wrong by here's a hand argument. So the point actually is that since it is so easy, it's too trivial, is that the triviality is like you have to then explain what is going on in the argument. Because the argument's too easy otherwise. Like, just like you disprove skepticism and then you don't, but you disproved it without understanding anything about what was going on. And so what is going on in Moore's here's a hand argument, that's what's important. You have to understand that better. Well, we all have to understand that better, not you, but we. Let's see. Reviews, symposium, comment on this, review. Alright, let's just move on. Benatar on the badness of all human lives. In this paper, a critique of David Benatar's argument on the badness of all human lives. Let's see if that's available. Why does everyone suck? Let's see if it's available. It's not available, so we're not reading it. Luck for moral luck. We're not talking moral luck. Those are annoying. They're not annoying. They're okay. Psychopaths and symmetry. Skeptics are the winner. Moral competence. Psychopaths and symmetry. Reply. You can check that funny thing. Yeah. Yeah. I like the jokes. Keep them coming, Tropical. Let's see. This is a debate. Let me see. Alright. No more of these. PPR. Let's see what we got. Evidential preemption. Oh boy. Resisting easy inferences. Otavio Bueno and Javier Cumpa. Amy Thomason has articulated a novel conception of ontological debates, defending an easy approach to ontological questions as part of the articulation of a deflationary metaphysical view. After raising some concerns to the approach, we sketch a neutralist alternative to her ontological framework, offering an even easier way of conducting ontological debates. Let's just click on it. I've heard Otavio Bueno speak before. Very intelligent. But if it's not here, it doesn't matter. Does it? Nope, not here. Oh, let's see. Let's see on the publisher site. Nope. Okay. Yeah, we're going to have to log in. And I'm not logged in. Yeah. Color relations in form. Propositions, let's see. Telling and the reasons of testimony. Can skeptics earn their keep? So we're just talking about skepticism. We could talk about that. Let's see if this is around. By Jonathan L. Van Veek. See if it's available. Not available. This is why I don't read anything from PPR. It never seems to show up. Duncan Pritchard, assurances, and it's very short. Let's see what we got. Let's see if it's available. But that's it. I'm tired of looking through this stuff. Kwanvig. Thank you, Valpo. I am not good with the language, actually. Oh. Duncan Pritchard might actually be here. Alright, let's just see real fast. Do we want to read assurances and disjunctivism? Alright, so we've got one potential here. I am not affiliated. I am happily just screwing around on my own. So, I also had analysis loaded up in the background. So, these are all short papers. Let's see if we can find something fun. Does anyone have like I said, if anyone has a preference, you let me know. Oh, do you want me to read the Quanvig then? Mm-hmm. Can skeptics earn their keep? He's a good writer, at least. Well, I will take it then. Yes. Do I have to download? I'm not logging into any of this. Save file. Okay. 19 pages. Oh, God. 19 pages, though. Let's take a look real quick. Yeah, 19-page document, single-spaced. This is going to kill me. All right, you know, we can shoot for this. If I don't make it and I die, well, what are you going to do? Don't be obligated on my account. I mean, I was just going to go to analysis and see if I could find anything here. Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll hold off on that one. Because 19 pages will take me about 2 hours to read. At my current rate, I don't even know if that would be, like, I'll start to collapse after a little while. I needed to, like, try to keep them under an hour and a half, usually. So, let's go to analysis real quick and see if we can find something fun. The function of knowledge. Go to the conclusion. What? In the other paper? I mean, I see I had it load up here. Concluding remarks. Let's go here. Where does this result leave skeptics? Here we must be more precise about exactly what it means to have a place at the table. This is unfair. I mean, you know, to skip to the end, like TLDR, what's the point? To not understand how it was argued for, to not give the author their due credit, it's basically you're strawmanning the author and the author's target, because that's what's going to happen. If I had just read the the previous paper, and I mean, I can do that, and then like go back and try and reconstruct the that might be a fun thing to do at some point, to, like, try and reconstruct what I thought their argument would be from the conclusion. But I don't want to just be like, hey, I'm going to read the last few sentences of your work and then, like, make fun of you. That'd be terrible. Human beings are epistemically independent. Interdependent, I'm sorry. The function of knowledge. A song to... this was, what's it called? We read this paper last time, so that means everything ahead of this is, newer. We could do some more, do some more epistemology. Let's do an epistemology day. The importance of evaluating the perspectival. Let's just see if we can find anything else that might be kind of fun. What's the point of knowledge? What's with all the epistemology today? Let's see, what can we do that might be fun? Modal argument improved. I think I've read this. Grounding grounds necessity. The method case unbound. What might but must not be. Come on, people. We need better clickbait titles. Evidential nihilism. Let's see if this. PD Magnus blogs. And so as one of the people I've seen blog, and the paper is available. So let's click on it. Let's just see if it's available here. Uniqueness and nihilism. Okay, let's try this. By P.D. Magnus. Yeah, Magnus Carlsen is amazing at chess. That's right. And yeah, a lot of people on Twitch are watching that probably. I've been trying to learn some chess by watching Twitch streamers. I watch Gotham Chess. I like Gotham Chess. He seems like a good guy. I think he represents New York well. So, shout out to Gotham Chess on Twitch. And, I mean, he of course has a very Hikaru Nakamura bias, but that's fine because, I mean, that's just like Team Nakamura. And Hikaru Nakamura, I think it's Nakamura. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. Apologize to Hikaru if I am. He streams on Twitch and plays Minesweeper sometimes. He's not bad at Minesweeper, so there's always a discussion of like, can we go get like Hikaru to play more Minesweeper in the Minesweeper community? Yeah. Here's the link to the paper. Yeah, so I was going to do a Minesweeper stream soon, too. I should get back to that. But, yeah, now I'm just being grumpy about philosophy. Evidential nihilism. And we're not reading no abstract. It would now be an overstatement to write, as Jonathan Matheson did several years ago, that the Uniqueness Thesis tends to receive rather little explicit attention. Nevertheless, I argue that there is an overlooked third option in the opposition between uniqueness and permissivism, which I call nihilism. Moreover, nihilism is not just a mere possibility in logical space. There may at least be some cases in which nihilism holds. Did I read this? I'm trying to remember. I'm actually thinking, did I say something on this? Oh dear, I hate when I do this. I don't remember. The problem is I think... Oh, you know what happened? No, I didn't read this. I read it on Magnus's blog. So let's go read it here. Okay, sorry. Nihilism is not just a mere possibility in logical space. Thank you, Marshall. I actually, a while ago, I did read a paper twice. And I had to stop like 15 minutes, and I was like, wait a sec, I know what's happening. But that was on grounding, and I had read like a bunch of papers on grounding, and then I forgot about it. There may be at least some cases in which nihilism holds. Okay, so what is the uniqueness thesis? The uniqueness thesis is typically posed as a universal claim which applies for all total evidence and for all propositions. As Thomas Kelly remarks, treating it as a universal claim makes it an extremely strong thesis, which can be overturned by even a single counterexample. Permissivism, posed as the negation of the uniqueness thesis, becomes the modest claim that there is at least one counterexample. But we don't know what it is to be unique then, alright. Rather than framing it as an all or nothing matter, let's begin with uniqueness and permissivism as two place relations which might obtain between a total evidence and a proposition. We can thus ask which holds in a specific case. If someone still wants to talk about them, the stronger uniqueness thesis and weaker permissivism can be expressed using these relations and quantifiers. The strong uniqueness thesis is then the claim that for all evidence and for all propositions, uniqueness obtains. The negation of that is the claim that for at least some evidence and for some proposition, uniqueness fails. Okay, so we're talking about like what it is to be unique, I guess, here? I'm not even sure. Find out. Uniqueness and permissivism. And yeah, like please ask me questions, but I have no idea what's going on right now. Uniqueness is the idea that evidence suffices to determine what one may rationally believe. So, given evidence, then it determines. And what exactly do they mean by determines? Like completely suffices to determine. Does this like completely rule out all possibilities of what you can't do and things like that? All right. Practical considerations do not enter into it. As Chris Meacham notes, the thesis at issue could more precisely be called evidential uniqueness. That is my target here, so I will omit the qualifier. Okay, so we're talking about evidence, and evidence completely closes off the different options that you can have. It's either you can only take these options, or you cannot take any others. Let's start with a typical formulation. Elizabeth Jackson and Margaret Turnbull, following Richard Feldman, define uniqueness as the thesis that there is at most one rational doxastic attitude towards a proposition. Similar definitions are given by Matheson and Kopek and Teitelbaum. Consider a schematic situation in which one has total evidence E and considers some proposition P. Suppose for now that there are three possible attitudes one can adopt towards P. One can believe P, disbelieve P, or suspend judgment. Note that disbelieving P means more or less the same thing as believing not P. It is stronger than merely not believing. The thesis posed by Jackson, Turnbull, Matheson, Kopek, and Teitelbaum is then U. Given E, there is at most one attitude which one may rationally adopt with respect to P. Alright, so if you believe something, if you have evidence for something, then that evidence completely gives you one attitude about what to do about it, given some evidence. There's not multiple realizability, it's just one attitude. You get that. Note that at most one allows for the possibility of zero. Jackson and Turnbull are explicit about allowing this. They write, Feldman's version of uniqueness allows for the possibility that for some bodies of evidence there may not even be one doxastic attitude which can be rationally adopted towards them. Kopek and Teitelbaum formulate the uniqueness thesis like U so as to allow for the possibility of rational dilemmas. They suggest that this would still be in the spirit of uniqueness. As I argue below, however, a central motivation for uniqueness is also motivation to reject the possibility of rational dilemmas. It is common to pose uniqueness and permissivism each as the negation of the other. For example, Bruckner and Bundy write that permissiveness is the denial of uniqueness. See also Kelly. This has an advantage of economy. Only one of the two needs to be carefully defined, the other can be defined just by relation to the other. Nevertheless, let's spell it out. With uniqueness understood as U, we get permissivism. Given E, there is more than one attitude which may rationally adopt towards P. Okay, so given the evidence that the sun rises in the morning, and that's our evidence that the sun rises, is there one? How many attitudes can we rationally adopt towards P? Some I guess the Earth is spinning. So the proposition that the Earth spins, and then the sun is rising every morning. So that's our evidence, and then we're calling it the Earth spins. And it seems that would be unjustified, to tell you the truth. We'd be more in the situation of we think we're stable, like back in the day, like in ancient times, before we knew the Earth spun. It would not be the thing to say that we are spinning and the rest of the universe is stable. It's better that we feel like we're not moving, and so that would be to say that the rest of the universe is spinning around us for whatever reason. But there's still only one thing to say. That's what the definition of uniqueness is, and permissivism says, hey, you could believe both. Note that the claim of permissiveness is not that one could possibly believe P and adopt some other attitude towards it at the same time, but just that one might rationally believe P or instead adopt some other attitude toward it. Roger White distinguishes strong and weak permissivism, which differ in whether all or just some attitudes are rationally permissible. According to strong permissivism, one may rationally adopt any attitude toward P. Let's return to the question of whether U captures the idea behind uniqueness. When Feldman originally introduces the uniqueness thesis, he characterizes it this way. The idea is that a body of evidence justifies at most one proposition out of a competing set of propositions. For example, one theory out of a bunch of exclusive alternatives, and that it justifies at most one attitude toward any particular proposition. As I think of things, our options with respect to any proposition are believing, disbelieving, and suspending judgment. Yet he quickly goes on to write, the uniqueness thesis says that, given a body of evidence, one of these attitudes is the rationally justified one. And he also writes, if the uniqueness thesis is correct, evidence uniquely determines one correct attitude, whether it is a belief, disbelief, or suspension of judgment. So he more often characterizes it in terms of exactly one rationally allowed attitude than in terms of at least one. So yeah, as opposed to like, you could believe it, disbelieve it, or suspend judgment, and it's not exact. So there's exactly one rational allowed attitude. So either you have to believe something, you have to disbelieve it, or you can just be like, I don't know. The thesis he offers in the latter passages, posed in terms of our schematic scenario, is uniqueness. Given evidence E, there is exactly one attitude, which one may rationally adopt towards P. Okay, so you have to pick something. This is more aptly called uniqueness because it claims that rationality picks out a unique attitude given the evidence. So from here on, let's use the name uniqueness just for this narrower claim. Alright, so it's not that it picks out something, it can only pick out one attitude though. Although permissivism is the negation of you, it is not the negation of uniqueness. There is a third possibility, namely that reason does not allow for any attitude. Let's call this possibility nihilism. Schematically, the claim is this. Given E, there is no attitude, which one may rationally adopt towards P. So I guess the difference here is that instead of saying belief, disbelief, or suspension of judgment, then there's also the option of none, and that's nihilism. And that's because you can't actually get an attitude. So the issue is that there is no correct attitude. So that's over here. So that you're going to negate that there is any notion of a correct attitude at all. So instead of one of these options, you're negating the whole thing of correctness. And I think that's what the author is saying here. So what would this mean? So given the world, I can say I believe something, I disbelieve something, I don't know. Or that what you're saying is so stupid that I can't understand why I would have any attitude at all. This is I am not dignifying that with a response answer. Your opinions are of such little importance that I don't have, I won't even think about it. Okay. I can't rationally adopt it because you're not rational. I'm just like, this is in some sense, I'm thinking of this in terms of a personal attack. I can't rationally adopt anything because you're not rational. I can't talk to you. So we've got permissiveness, uniqueness. Thanks for the lurk, Tropical Geek. I appreciate you stopping by. Permissiveness, uniqueness, nihilism for a trichotomy. Form a trichotomy. For you, if we wish to refer to it, it is the disjunction of uniqueness and nihilism. Okay. Yeah. So you're just adding the nihilism in because it's kind of going alongside the other options. So this distinguishes nihilism as a third logical possibility, yet one might object that this is needless logic chopping. This objection could take two forms. First, one might allow that you is not strictly speaking a claim of uniqueness, but insist that it nevertheless serves perfectly well as a foil for permissivism. Yeah. On the contrary, I argue in section 2 that some of the primary motivations for rejecting permissivism are also reasons to reject nihilism. Second, one might think that nihilism needs to be mentioned only so that it can be set aside. If it were never realized, then the real action would be between uniqueness and permissivism. I argue in section 3 that there may be some cases in which nihilism obtains. And that's just what I was saying. You might withhold opinions about some evidence. You might believe some evidence. You might disbelieve some evidence. You might also think that the evidence is so stupid that you're not going to talk about it. And that would be nihilistic because you're saying what you're saying does not matter. Ambivalence. All right. Roger White, a prominent defender of uniqueness, offers a panoply of arguments. Well, that's exciting. I haven't seen a panoply of arguments in a while. Nevertheless, there is one idea at the core of most of them. It is the worry that permissivism allows for an unacceptable arbitrariness about what to believe. Okay. Imagine you have considered your available evidence and concluded on the basis of that evidence that P obtains. You believe P and you think that you are rational to do so. Suppose further that you know this is a case in which permissivism holds. Someone might consider that same evidence, disbelieve P, or suspend judgment, and be just as rational as you are. This means that you could change your attitude towards P and not be any less rational than you are now. It is absurd that rationality should allow for this arbitrariness, White maintains, so permissivism must not hold. But why would you consider them to be just as rational as me? So, like, if someone can come to, like, start with the same premises and end with different conclusions, you'd think either they're using different rules of logic and so they're reasoning different from you, or that the premises were different and so it wasn't that they actually started with the exact same premises. So I don't know how your rational machinery would work in that way, assuming you are holding some sort of standard view of logic that maintains the truth. So I don't know, like, what this standard of rationality would be. I'd just say, well, the other person is not being rational. Okay. Oh, I hate intuition pumps. Never say intuition pump if you can help it. Like, this just annoys me. To strengthen the intuition pump, White describes a thought experiment pharmaceuticals that change your doxastic attitudes. For example, imagine that before you evaluate the evidence, you are offered a magic potion which would make you immediately adopt some attitude. If you knew that permissivism holds, you know that drinking the magic potion will give you an attitude that would be just as rational as any you could form by weighing the evidence. Should you drink the potion and save yourself the trouble? Surely, why not? White maintains. So, like, if you know you're going to believe it anyway, you could just drink the potion and, like, save yourself having to think about it. But how would you know you're going to believe it anyway? But you know that, okay, given that any of the options are rational, but you somehow have to know that any of the options were rational, you could just drink a potion and then just save yourself having to think about anything. Okay, but I don't know what it would mean to be rational in this case. Alternatively, imagine a kind of doxastic Jekyll and Hyde case. The good doctor believes P by day and disbelieves P by night. He collects no new evidence, but his attitude just switches back and forth with the rising and setting of the sun. If strong permissivism holds, the doctor's daytime belief is just as rational as his nighttime disbelief. So there is no rational objection to the toggling attitude either. But how could you not think that a steady attitude towards P on the basis of the evidence is more rational than the doctor's on-again, off-again belief? Yeah, you'd think it's two different people. You think it's not rational. Okay. Scenarios like these are easily multiplied, but they all have the same thrust. What is supposed to be absurd about permissivism is the indifference it posits between different attitudes. In all of these scenarios, you could do the best one could do rationality-wise, but be on the same footing if you kept your current attitude as if you changed it. White's intuition is that rationality just cannot be that fickle. Yeah. I mean, it seems very weird that rationality could, like, switch back and forth. Or at least, yeah, the whole point is that when you're doing logical reasoning, is that you maintain something. You're maintaining the truth, or you're maintaining some sort of inference rules. You have to, when you're doing logical reasoning, you are maintaining something from the premises to the conclusion. If you can get different conclusions from the same premises, you're not doing logic anymore. And so in some sense, what are you rationally doing at that point? How does this intuition bear on the possibility of nihilism? Imagine you have considered the available evidence and concluded on the basis of that evidence that P obtains, so you believe it. You believe P and you think nobody could settle the question more rationally than you have. Suppose further that you know this is a case in which nihilism holds. Someone might consider the same evidence, disbelieve P, or suspend judgment, and be precisely as rational as you are. White's intuition is that such arbitrariness is absurd. The previous paragraph just repeats the first reductio of permissivism, but with nihilism replacing permissivism, mutatis mutandis. One might think that there is a tremendous difference, that you are irrational in the nihilist case and would be irrational regardless of how you decide the question. Yet this parallels the permissivist case in an important sense. When you have considered the question and arrived at the belief that P, we can think of rationality as giving you a score or grade. In both cases, you would have gotten the same grade if you had disbelieved P instead. Moreover, in both cases, there is no alternative way of deciding a question that would give you a higher score. Alright, so this is what this is doing, is saying, alright, and I'm not sure if this makes a huge amount of sense, but saying, look, given, if we sort of deny that you can just switch attitudes, what we can call rationality is sort of like a meta decision thing, a scoring of how you're reasoning. And so either you get the right answer, which is to believe P based on the evidence, or you get the wrong answer, which could be any of the other ones. The difference between these two cases is just this. In the permissivist case, you get a passing grade of A+ regardless of what determination you make. In the nihilist case, you get a failing grade of F regardless. So if rationality says you have to choose one of those and you go nihilist, then you fail. And in the permissivist case, if rationality doesn't really grade you anymore, you always get an A. So you're getting, the way you're describing how your reasoning is changing at this point. One might think that this difference breaks the symmetry between the two cases. The metaphorical F in rationality is a bad thing, and you'd like to avoid getting a low mark like that. And one might think you could avoid it by forming no doxastic attitude at all with respect to P. Note, however, that suspending judgment counts as one of the possible doxastic attitudes. How could you escape the trichotomy between believing P, disbelieving P, and suspending judgment? You might not have the concepts required to think P, or perhaps you might just never have considered the matter. Yeah, this is the thing. This is what I was saying before. You might consider someone an idiot and you don't want to think like them. That means you might not have the concepts required to think P. So if you don't have the concepts required to think an idea, or you think the person is so insane to say that, and you're like, I can't even countenance this, you're not suspending judgment. You're saying, look, P doesn't exist, and so I can't have I'm not suspending judgment with relation to it that it could be true or false, but that it doesn't even make sense that I could have a belief, disbelief, or hold off on that, because there's nothing to hold off on. It's crazy, and it's not like you can either believe it or disbelieve it, because even countenancing it doesn't really make sense. Okay, so this is what we were getting at. On some accounts, a perfectly rational agent would have a doxastic attitude, a belief attitude towards every proposition. On such accounts, having not considered the matter is already a symptom of irrationality. Regardless, once you consider the question, it is too late. You will wind up in some doxastic state. If nihilism holds, that means that the outcome will be irrational. So there is a parallel arbitrariness in cases of extreme permissivism and nihilism. In either case, doing as well as one could do rationality-wise is compatible with different resultant attitudes, and adopting one attitude rather than another makes no difference by dint of reason. If one is persuaded by White's worries about arbitrariness to reject permissivism, then one also ought to reject nihilism. Maybe. I mean, I'm not sure that, again, there's like a question of like, what is all your background knowledge? It's like, and you can't like enumerate all the evidence anyone has. It's like you're saying this is sort of like an arbitrary understanding of where our reasoning comes from. It's like, well, we're reasoning based on evidence E. That's not true. That's not true. You're not reasoning only based on evidence E. You're reasoning based on evidence E, all the logic that you've ever learned in your life, all your history, how you go about learning stuff. So it's not so clear exactly what rationality consists of. And so the idea that you can switch back and forth and that someone else is equally rational as you, well, maybe they have some different reasoning methods in their history that, you know, most of the time it works. Same thing with you. Doesn't always work, though. And so why are we ascribing the same rationality? We don't know what rationality is. So, anyway. Note, however, that the parity only holds between nihilism and strong permissivism. For a more modest permissivism, which identifies some doxastic states as irrational, the parity fails. There are at least two ways this might go. First, suppose that the evidence unambiguously but weakly supports P, and that how much evidence would be sufficient to establish P is vague. Perhaps in such a case, one might rationally believe P or suspend judgment, while disbelieving P would be ruled out. This would still be permissivism, but without the complete ambivalence of strong permissivism or nihilism. Alright, so you're ruling some things out in some weak permissivism. Whatever. Second, it might be that rational belief is determined by more than just evidence. For example, take a subjective Bayesian account. The Bayesian parses the possible attitudes as credences, degrees of belief, rather than as categorical belief and disbelief. What degrees of belief are rational will depend both on the evidence and on one's prior probabilities. Rationality does not require any specific set of prior probabilities. Moreover, since subjective priors need not reflect the world in any way, it is implausible to think them as evidence. So there may be credences in P that might rationally be adopted given E. Permissivism holds, but nihilism does not. Okay, so what this is saying is like, hey, you can set the whole thing up and you can exclude certain things from being evidence, and then you could get different conclusions. And so some permissivism holds, but nihilism does not, since everyone has agreed to use the same sort of reasoning scheme, the Bayesian scheme. And so, but the problem is the way you set up your Bayesianism matters. And so then you could like come out with different answers given some evidence. Okay. But like you're still not going to be nihilistic because you still have a reasoning scheme given by the Bayesian equations. Alright, to sum up, many reasons for uniqueness and many kinds of permissivism demand rejecting nihilism, so it is best to distinguish nihilism as a third possibility. Yet one may ask, are there any cases in which nihilism obtains? And I think I gave a few earlier. It's that you just, you think the person's an idiot and you can't trust their reasoning at all. And so in some sense, if they are out to get you, you can't trust their evidence. And so it's not your withholding judgment. It's that even understanding, like even accepting what they're saying could be detrimental to your like rationality. Like, so if they set up something you think is going to mess with your head, and you're like, I'm not even going to listen to this person. That's not withholding judgment. That's like saying, you're a bad person and I won't talk to you. And it's not the same thing. Okay. Does nihilism ever obtain? Michael K. suggests as a principle of rationality that someone is subject to rational criticism only if they selected a belief or action inappropriately. In order for someone to be irrational, there must have been some other selection such that if they had made it, they would be not subject to criticism. It would follow from K's principle that nihilism never obtains because someone faced with a case of nihilism would have no options but irrational ones. So if there were nothing one could have done to avoid being irrational, then there is a sense in which one cannot be criticized for failing to be rational. Yet one might simply turn this round and say that cases of nihilism would undermine K's principle. Settling this would require a fuller story about rationality. My point here is simply that K's principle should not be taken as an intuitive datum. Consider an analogy with ethical normativity. There are situations in which moral obligations seem to conflict. Some philosophers accept these as genuine moral dilemmas. Others argue that any would-be dilemma must ultimately dissolve under examination. One obligation or principle must override the other such that there is at least some way to meet the demands of ethics. Moral dilemmas are argued to be incompatible with various principles of deontic logic, but the general principles do not show how to resolve particular would-be dilemmas. The evidential situation is similar. If there are cases in which nihilism seems to hold, then general principles may not be enough to defeat them. I consider two kinds of cases. First, Matheson suggests that there is no rational attitude to adopt towards a proposition in cases of incomplete understanding. I argue that such cases do not provide compelling instances of nihilism. Second, paradoxes. I discuss one recent consistent treatment of paradox and suggest that it might offer cases where nihilism holds. Yeah, so this is where you gotta go. Paradox is where you can't rationally understand something because it is against, it resists any sort of logical conclusion. And the times when you just don't have enough information, that would be more of a withholding evidence case. But let's find out what the author says. And please, ask me questions. I know I'm like getting scratchy here. I haven't talked for this long in a while. You know, like, why I guess the real question with this paper is, like, what are we going to do? And there's something back to epistemology that I completely dislike. It's the concept that we have epistemic peers. Thank you, DeMarshall. The concept of epistemic peers annoys the hell out of me. Epistemic peers means that, like, other people you think are just as rational as you. I don't really find this to be a good idea. Other people are plenty rational, but other people don't know what I know. And so the idea that, like, especially on topics where I know something, I am not going to just grant someone the idea that they know as much on the topic as I have. I mean, there are some people that might, but most of the time, no. Just no. Like, the vast majority of the time. Only in, like, say, a professional setting. And then usually I know less than them. It's like, this is not, like, the idea that there's some sort of equivalence principle that you should, like, give people. I find that just ludicrous. Either I know more or I know less. The idea that we know the same amount, we have the same amount of rationality, I just find that to be hopelessly, like, it would just be lucky if that happened. It'd be like finding an alien race exactly that looked like us, was exactly as smart as us. It's like, nah. It's just like, that's not how this is going to happen. Either they're going to be more advanced than us, they're going to be a lot dumber than us, but, like, the idea that we're going to be, like, on complete parity and of everybody you're going to meet, it's like, why would I ever grant that anyone's going to be on the same level and that the rationality of our like, between me and someone else is going to be on the same, like, on par? I just find that ludicrous. But, like, this seems to be a very pervasive idea, and that's, like, what was going on earlier in this paper, where they were saying, like, hey, someone of equal rationality comes to a different conclusion. Hell fucking no. Just no. Just no. I find that, like, I don't understand why people think that at all. I think it's a terrible idea. Okay, let's go back to this. Incomplete understanding. Take a case posed by Matheson. He argues that it may be that no doxastic attitudes are rational to adopt towards a proposition which one does not or cannot understand. Matheson poses this kind of case as a reason to define uniqueness in at most rather than exactly terms, as what I labeled U in section 1. Distinguishing nihilism as a third possibility, however, this seems to be a case of it. If one does not understand the content of P, then one cannot rationally adopt any attitude towards it. One cannot adapt any attitude towards a proposition one does not understand, not rationally but not irrationally either. As Friedman observes, one cannot count as agnostic about P if one cannot even grasp P. So one never ends up in the situation of irrationally holding one attitude or another. So this kind of nihilist case escapes the worry about arbitrariness posed in section 2. However, the questions of permissivism, uniqueness, or nihilism are only interesting in situations where someone confronts a question and might adopt an attitude. So it is tempting to reconstrue the question in a way so that nihilism does not automatically hold in the cases that Matheson poses. There are at least two ways to do this. First, we could revise the definitions of the various positions so that they only apply to agents who understand P. Then none of the three would apply to such cases. Second, we could construe rationality as an ideal which is beyond the reach of a cognitively limited agent who does not fully understand the question before them. Then it could still be that uniqueness holds in such cases. Reason would demand more than the agent could actually do. Yeah, so, like, basically, it's like if you had more time, then they could come up with it. And they might even know that if they had more time to like, look at a problem, they could figure it out. It's like, look, I just don't have time to, like, do this big math problem, but, like, it's only addition. So I could do it. So I'm going to withhold judgment because I know it's addition and that the addition has an math. But, like, I looked at it too quickly, and so it's like I can't rationally come up with the answer, but I know what addition is, and so I can withhold judgment in that case. But, like, that would be, there's an answer, but you could come up with stuff, but you're withholding judgment at that time. But then you get no nihilism. Okay, by adopting either or both of these answers, we avoid treating cases of incomplete understanding as ones where nihilism holds. Fair. Paradoxes and indeterminate beliefs. Okay, so now we're going to get to something a bit more exotic. Return to the analogy with moral dilemmas. The obvious doxastic analog is a paradox, a proposition which we have compelling reason to believe and compelling reason to disbelieve. Understood in those terms, to believe would ignore the rational demand to disbelieve would ignore the demand to believe, and to suspend judgment would ignore both. Any option would be irrational. So one might say that the paradox is a case where nihilism holds. Of course, there are many philosophical approaches to handling paradoxes. Here I will consider just one: power-complete resolutions, according to which paradoxical propositions are neither true nor false. So instead of something being true, instead of something being false, it's not true or false. That's the this one is power-complete. So there's Oh, now I'm blank on the word, but all right. The author is explaining. Power complete resolutions require that there's power consistent and power complete. So power complete means there's gaps in what we know. There's gaps in truth. Power consistent means there's no gaps, but then you get multiple truth values. So as opposed to there being gaps in the thing where it's not true or false, power consistent is where there's an overlap, where you've got both things that are both true and false. So power consistent is an overlap. Power complete is a gap in your truth. The way the world is. Like there's holes somewhere in power complete, and in power consistent there's overlaps. So gaps and overlaps. Power complete resolutions require that there are some propositions which are neither true nor false, that is, which have an indeterminate truth value. Suppose you know, or at least believe, that a proposition P is indeterminate in this sense. It would be inappropriate to believe P because P is not true. Similarly, it would be inappropriate to disbelieve P because P is not false. Michael K. argues further that one ought not to suspend judgment about P in such a case. His reason is that agnosticism is the correct attitude to take toward a proposition about which one takes oneself to be ignorant. When you know that a proposition is indeterminate, you are not ignorant about it. Rather, you know precisely what to say about it. You should say that it is indeterminate. Note that nothing in this argument requires the principle discussed above, which puts K at odds with nihilism. That's right. You know that this proposition has no truth value. So it's not that you are ignorant of it. You know that it is gappy in the literature. And by the way, if you look at the literature about the power consistent ones, not the power complete, not the gap, but the overlap, they call it gluts, which I think everyone kind of hates. And I know for a fact the person who coined it, I think, is at NYU. I think he coined it a glut to annoy the people because he didn't like it, and he knew a glutty situation, a glutty solution would just annoy the people because it sounds like fat and bad. So gluts were purposefully done to annoy the people who are power consistent that have both true and false. But to be a little bit more fair, you gap and overlap as opposed to gap and glut. Yeah, I think it was Kit Fine might have done it. I think it's Kit Fine at NYU that was the first to use glut as a way to describe the world in power consistent logic. Yes, it is exactly petty academic revenge. What else are you going to do? But yeah, I prefer gap and overlap myself. Kay proposes his argument primarily in relation to semantic paradoxes, like the liar sentence, where evidence seems irrelevant, but he also intends it to apply to power-complete treatments of vagueness. Whether or not one should believe that a vague proposition is indeterminate depends on evidence. So consider a case where evidence E supports the conclusion that P is a vague boundary case. One ought to conclude that P is indeterminate. According to Kay, one ought not believe, disbelieve, or suspend judgment about P. This is by definition what it is for nihilism to obtain. Yeah, so I guess you could say, like, in the case where something's vague, like being bald, maybe, where it's like you don't have enough hair to say that they're bald, and they don't have enough hair to say that they have a full head of hair, but you know exactly how much hair they have. In some sense, you're not saying you don't have the information about their baldness. You're saying you're not going to use baldness. You're suspending you're not suspending judgment about whether they're bald or not bald because you know exactly how much hair they have on their head. You're saying this is in some sense not the right terms to use, and you're going to be nihilistic about baldness in that case. Okay, one might reply, K's ultimate conclusion is that the indeterminate truth calls for indeterminate belief. If one believes that some proposition P is indeterminate, the only room left is for it to be indeterminate whether one believes P. In fact, he argues for the stronger conclusion that rationality requires that it must be indeterminate whether one believes P, if and only if one believes that P is indeterminate. He is arguing that rationality requires something rather specific, which sounds more like uniqueness than nihilism. Yeah, if you're saying that you have to match up your beliefs with your values, that's kind of metaphysically heavyweight, but whatever. We can reconcile this by revisiting the presupposition that there are three possible doxastic attitudes. Yeah, because he's matching the doxastic attitudes with the propositions then. Believe P, disbelieve P, suspend judgment about P, and adding a fourth, adding the possibility of having it be indeterminate whether one believes P. With this new and large set of possible doxastic states, K's conclusion is an instance of uniqueness. He argues that precisely one of the four possibilities is required by rationality. K suggests that rationality requiring indeterminate belief shows ipso facto that indeterminate belief is a doxastic state. However, it seems odd to say that one adopts a doxastic state attitude toward P when it is indeterminate whether one believes P. A case where it is indeterminate whether one believes is a specific doxastic state only if being indeterminate is a way that your belief can be. This requires in turn that indeterminate truth be another truth value rather than a genuine gap. This is contentious at best. Yeah, so it's like if you're saying something's indeterminate and then you're saying you're defining your truth, your beliefs in terms of like some metaphysical way truth could be. That seems like putting the cart before the horse, as they said, like why would you define your beliefs that way? Why is the way your belief is depending on how some other part of the world is? And then you're also calling that a new truth value, so you're putting your foot down saying indeterminate truth is a new truth value. You're not even talking about something being both neither true or false or both true and false, but you're calling it an indeterminate true and false. And so now you've got a third truth value, and so it's like, well, you can do that, of course, but why? Why would you want to? You have to have an independent justification. So it seems a bit ad hoc is the argument here. The author says, I only want to argue for this disjunction. If we allow only for the three possible attitudes which we supposed at the outset, then K's argument leads to nihilism. If we add to the set of possible attitudes, it leads to uniqueness. This illustrates a maneuver which I think is more general. Facing a prima facie, why would you say that? Facing a prima facie case of nihilism, a counter-strategy is to add a new possibility to the list of possible doxastic attitudes. One may then say that rationality requires this new outlier attitude and that uniqueness holds. Whether this maneuver is plausible in particular cases will depend on the broader issue of what counts as a doxastic state, an issue which I won't pretend to resolve here. Yeah, I'd say, look, you can always add a new doxastic state to match up with something in the world, but that just seems terribly ad hoc. But fine. If you want to do that, you can, and then you avoid nihilism, and then you get back to uniqueness, but you can have basically embedded nihilism into the uniqueness options. And so you're sort of moving the location of nihilism under uniqueness as opposed to having it nihilism or uniqueness. So that's okay, but I mean, again, what would be the philosophical reasoning for holding that sort of case? And I don't know if it would make any difference, but it's not, as the author says, it won't get resolved here and won't make a big difference for their argument. Conclusion. I've argued that there is a third possibility besides uniqueness and permissivism when we consider them as features which might hold of particular cases, and have called this third possibility nihilism. I've argued that considerations which lead some philosophers to favor uniqueness over permissivism should also lead them to reject the possibility of nihilism. And some accounts which favor permissivism over uniqueness should also reject nihilism. Finally, I've argued that there's at least some construals of paradox according to which nihilism holds. And that's it. Okay, so this is short article, of course, nice little thing to do, and you talk about, hey, given different rational outcomes, what can you do? You can believe, disbelieve. Let's see if we can get this in. Believe, disbelieve, withhold judgment, or avoid the whole problem. and not avoiding the whole problem is not to withhold judgment. It says I'm not even going to talk about that. So how reasonable is that, given like anything you might want to say? Well, I'm going to believe it, I'm going to disbelieve it, I'm going to wait and see, or I'm not even going to talk to you. Please, someone ask a question. I'm going to think about that for a sec. It's like, I don't know. I mean, you're sort of... This is the skepticism. Like what? What kind of Pyrrhonian skepticism? What's that actually? Oh, gosh. See, the problem is, at this point, I start blanking on things I should know. I think that would just be a form of, like, holding off, like we just don't know. Skepticism, like we wouldn't know, and so you're holding off judgment and saying, well, I'm skeptical. And if you're going to be a skeptic about this sort of thing, that means you can't really hold either one way or the other, and then you're going to say, look, we're going to hold off because we can't know, and you're going to always be in the state of can't knowing. I guess you could always be a skeptic in that case. But like I think that falls into the uniqueness category. Well, I think it would be yeah, I don't know either, DeMarshall, exactly where skepticism, like what, like if you have like different forms of skepticism, like I think it's like suspending judgment is the skepticism, would be the skeptical option. So you're not holding a belief that you think it's one way or the other. You're saying we don't know because I'm skeptical. And I'm going to suspend my belief. For now, at least. Now, might it be that the skeptic says, look, these options are ridiculous because you're never going to get out of skepticism, so is that nihilism? Maybe. I think it depends on exactly what kind of skepticism you have. So if you have a really hardcore skepticism, like, Cartesian demon, and so that means there's nothing to believe or disbelieve because everything's an illusion, then maybe that'd be nihilistic. You'd say, well, everything's an illusion, and then you're going to get yourself a nihilistic position. Modes of skepticism are the 10 and the Agrippa is the 5. Yeah, exactly. They put different scales on all of these things. We're like, that's only kind of rational. We're going for full rational, not partial rational here. We need a much harder justification of rationality according to the thing. Yeah, I think this was a nice article. It's once I figured out what was going on in some sense, then like this was it was set up nicely. You get yourself some examples you can actually talk about, and then the author says, look, and then the author sets it up nicely so you can say, hey, look, we've got this sort of like this group of things over here, which are uniqueness and permissivism, but then you can like avoid the whole thing. And it's like once you do that, you can sort of then get yourself out of that whole area. So I thought this was nicely argued. These examples here, which were kind of interesting, intuition pumps drive me nuts. You could just give examples. Yeah, so this is the other part where you need to know more, and you need the concepts to know more. It's not just that you don't know enough, it's that you need even more concepts to explain an idea like P. So it's like, say I'm talking about like some fancy physics no one here knows. And like, well, you could say, well, I'm not suspending judgment. I can't even know the concepts here, so I don't even know if I could rationally explain this. So, I mean, there's things like that. And so maybe you could say, look, if I learn more, I could discuss it, but I don't even know enough to say if these concepts make sense. And so that would be a way to like not suspend judgment about the concept. It'd be to suspend judgment about the proposition about the world. It's suspending judgment about the concepts themselves that describe the world, and then you can say, well, I'm kind of going to avoid the whole question. So that's a way. That's kind of what's going on with. That's like one way to get out of this. It's like I don't think these concepts. I don't have enough information about the concepts. Not even what they're claiming about the world, but the concept themselves. So let's see. And then, this was the thing. It says, well, is this interesting? Well, it's like, not really. You can say, then you just run the argument again, as they were saying here. Look, then you should just learn the concepts, and then you'll have an option once you learn the concepts. And then the other kind is where we have full understanding of the concepts, but they still resist any easy thing you should believe, like a paradox. And then in that case, you have to go power consistent, power complete, one of these power things. And when you do that, then you can say, all right, fine. And we understand the paradox perfectly well in that case, but I'm going to not choose any of the withhold judgment. There's nothing to withhold about, and it's not to be believed or disbelieved. I'm going to say the whole thing needs to be sort of set aside, and I'm not going to talk about it. And that's the quietest answer, actually, to the paradoxes. So that's kind of what's going on here. You're nihilistic about it. You're, yeah. Is that it? Is that what this is doing? It's, yeah, I think that's what this is. I think this is the quietest answer to the paradox, is actually. Let's see. No, not uniqueness. Let me see. I'm just trying to get back to where that answer was. What the author says here. It is all right. So you're saying it is indeterminate. So you have nothing else to say. Okay, so it's not entirely quietist. It's just saying, look, it's indeterminate, and we know it's indeterminate because you are a power complete logician. And so that's just how you think the world is. So that's it. So you're putting your foot down about power completeness, and that gives you a logical way out. Of course, you can argue against power completeness in various ways, but you can say, hey, look, it's not going to be something I believe, disbelieve, or indeterminate about. It's something that is inherently get put off until I learn more, because I know everything about it. And you're going to say it's indeterminate inherently, and therefore there's nothing else to say. Okay, that's fair. So, anyone else have a comment, question, stuff? Let's see, anything interesting here? Epistemic permissiveness. All right. I mean, I think this is fine. Of course, how impressive you take this is how impressive this paper is. Depends on how much weight you give to these previous theories, the uniqueness and permissivism. If you think that's super important, thank you to Marshall. If you think that's like super important, then like there's a big paper. If you were not like if this is not your area on uniqueness and what you think rational outcomes are going to be, like you think that's like, okay, fine, you're gonna come up with some answer, or you're not going to come up with some answer. I mean, this is not like a crazy way to be. Like, I'm not like fussed about how the outcomes of rationality are. Then you're not going to be like, well, this is super impressive. But it is an interesting way to go in that you can get out of what might be considered rational responses by saying, I'm going to like just say, or we could not do those things that are normally given to rationality. And I mean, that's sort of the logical out. So, okie dokie. I'm going to then be done for today. I hope to be back more. I mean, at least in my life, things have Well, I shouldn't say they stabilized. Very little has stabilized for me, but the things that were keeping me from streaming have stabilized. And so I am not going to be, hopefully that won't interfere with, what about if I tell you I never met rationality? I ain't never met rationality either. I'm with you on that one, DeMarshall. So, yeah. So, cool. So I hope to be back soon. I'm going to go try and work on my Minesweeper program and do more stuff. And then we can hopefully have some more fun. But otherwise, that will be it for now. Let's see if there's anyone... Let's see. Is there any way for me to go find out if there's anyone to raid really fast? Much love to Marshall. I thank you for being here. I thank everyone else for being here. Valpo, I appreciate. Who else? We got Tropical Geek. Thank you for talking. Appreciate it. Let's see. Is there anyone I follow that's up? 3Moth is up. I love 3Moth, but not rating 3Moth. Okay. So, no one to raid. It is sort of like midday in the US. Keeping the spark ignited. Awesome. Alright, so everyone have a great day, and that'll be it for now. So, stay safe, stay healthy, and be well. Treat each other well.